Listen closely. For this is not just a tale of long ago. This is a mirror. A mirror held up to every leader, every dreamer, every fool who believes that gold is greater than wisdom. What you are about to hear is the story of a king. A king who thought he could sell the very soul of his people. And he learned too late that when you trade wisdom for wealth, you do not gain riches. You invite ruin. Long ago, beyond the deserts and the wide green valleys, there was a kingdom called Obikara. Its soil was rich. Its rivers curved like silver snakes through the land. Its people were strong. But none of this made Obikara great. What made it great was wisdom. The people of Obikara guarded wisdom as their most precious treasure. They passed it through proverbs. They hid it in songs. They carried it in stories told at the fireside. Even the sacred drums beat not just rhythms, but the lessons of their ancestors. Children grew up knowing not just how to live, but how to live rightly. And at the heart of this kingdom stood a tree, the mighty Baobab, older than memory, wider than 10 men's arms could circle. It was said that beneath its shade, the ancestors whispered counsel to the elders. The people called it the root of all counsel. Every king before had known this truth. He who protects the wisdom of his people protects his throne. But then came King Damba. Damba was not like the kings before him. Where others listened, he grew restless. Where others honored wisdom, he mocked it. Where others counted wisdom as gold, he counted gold as wisdom. His palace was already high. His robes already glittered with jewels. But still, his hunger grew. To him, wisdom was nothing but old men's talk. Dry, slow, unprofitable. He would laugh and say, "What can stories build? What can proverbs buy? Gold. Gold is the only wisdom I need." The people whispered uneasily. The elders frowned. The priests at the Baobab shook their heads. For they knew, when a king mocks wisdom, he mocks the very roots of his people. But Damba did not care. Then one night, as the moon climbed high, a trader arrived from a far-off land. His name was Maliku, a man whose tongue dripped honey, but whose eyes glittered like a snake's. He carried strange spices, exotic cloths, treasures unseen in Obikara. But what caught King Damba's greedy eye was a chest of gold, stacked higher than any he had ever seen. "Great king," Maliku said, bowing low, "I bring you riches beyond imagining. But I do not seek to trade in cloth, nor in spices, nor in ivory. I want something far rarer. I want the wisdom of your people." The court gasped. The elders trembled. One elder, bent with years, stood tall in spirit. His name was Ekwueme. He cried out, "My king, beware. Wisdom is not a thing to be sold. It is the root of our strength. Without it, we are but leaves in the wind, lost to every storm." But King Damba only laughed. He raised his golden staff and shouted, "Old man, you speak as one who has never tasted wealth. What use is wisdom when gold can build palaces, buy armies, silence hunger? If this merchant wants our stories, our proverbs, our drums, let him have them. I will be the richest king in all the lands." The elders fell silent. The people wept in secret. But the king would not be moved. That very night, under the pale eye of the moon, Maliku spread coins of gold before the king. Mountains of them, enough to blind the heart. And in exchange, the king handed over the sacred drums, the scrolls of proverbs, the carved bark of the baobab tree itself. One by one, The treasures of wisdom left Obikara. One by one, the roots of the kingdom were cut. And though the palace grew heavy with gold, the hearts of the people grew empty. And so it began. A kingdom once rooted in wisdom, dangling by the thread of a fool's pride. But remember this. When a tree's roots are cut, no matter how tall it stands, it will surely fall. At first, the people thought nothing had changed. The sun still rose. The rivers still flowed. The market still bustled with laughter and trade. And in the palace, King Damba feasted. He sat high on his throne, gold stacked at his feet like a mountain. He smiled, believing he had outsmarted the world. But then, small cracks began to show. The children, who once gathered at night to hear the elders tell stories, now sat in silence. The tales were gone. The scrolls that carried proverbs had been taken away. Where once they had heard, patience is the farmer's best tool, they now heard nothing. Where once they had learned, even the smallest ant has wisdom to teach, they now learn nothing. The children of Obikara began to grow, but without roots. Then came the farmers. Before, they had planted in unity, remembering the ancient songs that told them when to sow, when to harvest, when to rest. But now, the songs were gone. The wisdom of the drums was gone. The rains came early, and the fields drowned. The sun burned too long, and the crops withered. Without wisdom, their hands worked the soil, but the soil no longer answered. Soon, disputes rose among the people. Neighbors quarreled. Families broke apart. For in Obikara, wisdom had once been the oil that kept the wheels of peace turning. But without it, every small stone sparked a fire. Every small word cut like a blade. The elders tried to gather the people. They sat under the Baobab, but the tree's bark was bare. Its carvings, gone. Its voice, silent. The elders wept. They could not guide the people, for the people no longer trusted them. What wisdom can you give us? They asked, when the king has sold it away. And in his palace, King Damba laughed louder than ever. Look at my wealth, he cried. Am I not the greatest king alive? Do not speak to me of lost stories or vanished songs. I have gold, and with gold I can buy anything. But he was wrong. Gold cannot buy harmony. Gold cannot buy respect. Gold cannot buy the roots of a people. Then one day, Maliku, the merchant, returned. But this time, he did not come to trade. He came to rule. You see, Maliku knew something the king did not. When you strip a people of their wisdom, they become weak. When their roots are cut, they are easy to bend, easy to break. And so Maliku came back. Not with gold, but with soldiers. The people of Obikara, once united by wisdom, now stood divided. Some followed the king. Some resisted. Most stood confused, not knowing what was right or wrong anymore. Maliku's army walked in like a flood, and no one could stop them. The king watched in terror, as the very merchants he trusted took his throne, took his palace, and even took the gold he had been given. Damba tried to protest. He cried, "This is my kingdom." But Maliku only laughed. "Foolish king," he said. "You sold your people's wisdom. You sold the very thing that made them strong. Did you think I gave you gold out of kindness? No. I bought the roots of your tree. And now the tree has fallen." The palace echoed with silence. The people bowed their heads. And King Damba, once drunk with pride, now sat in chains of his own making. He had gained gold, but lost everything else. And so, Obikara, the kingdom once famed for its wisdom, became a shadow. A land where stories were forgotten, where children grew without guidance, where elders spoke, but no one listened. For the greatest treasure of the people was gone. But hear me now. The story does not end here. For even when roots are cut, sometimes a seed remains. And from that seed, a new tree may rise. Maliku now sat on the throne, not as a guest, not as a trader, but as a ruler. The golden chest he had once brought, he now carried away. The wealth King Damba had been so proud of, it was gone, stolen, taken back by the man who had set the trap. The people looked to their king. But what king was left? A man who had sold their stories, their proverbs, their counsel. He sat in silence, his crown heavy with shame. Damba's voice, once loud with laughter, was now a whisper in the wind. The elders tried to gather courage. They tried to remember the old sayings, but without the carved bark, without the sacred scrolls, without the beating of the wisdom drums, their words felt hollow. For a people who have lost their wisdom soon lose their way. The children of Obikara grew restless. No one told them the old tales. No one taught them the parables. They wandered the streets, mocking their elders, living without guidance. And in the markets, strangers ruled. Prices rose. Quarrels turned to fights. And the laughter that once filled the air was gone. The Baobab tree stood tall, but its spirit seemed dim. Its shade no longer gave peace. Its silence grew heavy. The people whispered, "Perhaps the ancestors have left us. Perhaps they no longer hear our cries." Meanwhile, Maliku ruled with cunning. He knew the people were weak without wisdom. He knew they could not rise together. So he divided them further. He whispered lies to some. He bribed others with trinkets. He placed spies in every corner. And slowly, Obikara bent beneath his hand. But not everyone forgot. Not every ear was deaf. Not every heart was blind. In the hills, far from the palace, a young boy still listened. His name was Kamau. He was no elder. He was no chief. He was simply the grandson of Ekwueme, the old man who had once won the king. Though the scrolls were gone, though the drums were stolen, Ekwueme had carried something no thief could touch. Memory. At night, when the village grew quiet, he would whisper to his grandson, "Kamau, wisdom is not in scrolls. It is not in carvings. It is not in drums. Wisdom lives in the heart. And as long as one remembers, the people are not truly lost." Kamau listened. He stored every word in his soul. He repeated every proverb until it burned into his memory. And though he was young, his eyes grew deep, like wells holding hidden water. One evening, as the moonlight bathed the Baobab tree, Ekwueme placed his wrinkled hand on Kamau's shoulder. "Grandson," he said, "the king has lost his way. The people wander in darkness. But you must carry the flame. Do not let the merchant's shadow consume us. A day will come when Obikara will need its wisdom again. And you will be the one to speak it." Kamau trembled. "But I am only a boy." And Ekwueme smiled faintly. So was the boy David when he faced Goliath. So was Joseph when he dreamed. So was every seed, before it grew into a mighty tree. The next morning, the village awoke to sorrow. Ekwueme, the last voice of the old wisdom, had gone to join the ancestors. The people mourned. But Maliku did not care. He only tightened his grip. Yet in Kamau's heart, a seed had been planted. And seeds, though small, have the power to break stone. Time passed. The people grew more weary. The fields gave less harvest. The markets grew thin. Even the rivers seemed to shrink. Without wisdom, the land itself felt cursed. And still, King Damba sat in silence. His eyes empty. A prisoner of his own folly. But Kamau, he carried something no one else had. The memory of wisdom. The courage of youth. And the fire of hope. The story of Obikara was not finished yet. For even in darkness, a single candle can light the way. Years passed. And though Obikara was still called a kingdom, it was a kingdom in name only. The throne no longer commanded respect. The markets no longer echoed with joy. The fields no longer blessed the people with abundance. And the king who had once laughed at wisdom, was now a hollow man. A crown on his head, but no strength in his soul. But far from the palace, in the quiet of the hills, a boy had become a young man. Kamau. He was not born a prince. He had no jewels, no armies, no throne, but he carried something greater. The gift his grandfather left him. Wisdom. At night, Kamau would sit by the fire and whisper the proverbs Ekwueme had taught him. He would tell them to other children. He would tell them to farmers. He would tell them to mothers and fathers who gathered in silence. And slowly, the words began to spread. The people remembered. Patience is the farmer's best tool. Even the smallest ant has wisdom to teach. The tree that forgets its roots will fall. The flames of memory flickered again. The people began to notice Kamau. Who is this boy? They whispered. Whose words sound older than his years? Who is this youth? Whose voice carries the echo of the ancestors? And the people began to listen. Meanwhile, in the palace, Maliku's rule grew heavier. He raised taxes. He punished dissent. He silenced every voice of resistance. But what he did not know was that a new voice was rising in the hills. Not the voice of war. Not the voice of rebellion. But the voice of wisdom. One day, a famine struck Obikara. The rains failed. The rivers dried. The people cried out in despair. Maliku tightened his grip, hoarding grain for himself and his soldiers. The people starved. Children cried with hollow eyes. But Kamau stood before them and spoke. Listen. The land has always spoken to us. The ancestors have always guided us. Do not despair. Do not scatter. We will plant again. But this time we will plant together. He taught them the old ways. The planting songs. The rhythm of seasons. The wisdom of patience. And slowly, though the soil was dry, green shoots began to rise. The people saw it. And their hope returned. Word spread. Kamau has brought back the wisdom. Kamau has spoken the words of the ancestors. Kamau has done what the king and the merchant could not. And whispers turned into gatherings. Gatherings turned into movements. The people began to follow the boy who carried wisdom in his heart. In the palace, Maliku heard the rumors. A boy. A storyteller. A seed of resistance growing in the hills. He laughed at first. What can a boy do against a king? But deep in his heart, he felt the stirring of fear. For he knew. Wisdom is more dangerous to tyrants than swords. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, Kamau stood under the Baobab. He placed his hand on its great trunk and whispered. ancestors. I am only one. But I will not let your voice die. I will not let your wisdom vanish. Let me be your echo. Let me be your drum. And in the stillness, a breeze rustled through the branches. The leaves shivered, as though the tree itself had heard. That night, the people gathered under the Baobab. Men, women, children, all came in silence. Kamau stood before them. He raised his voice. The king has sold our wisdom. The merchant has stolen our strength. But wisdom is not lost. It cannot be caged. It cannot be bought or sold. As long as one remembers. The ancestors still live. And I remember. The people roared in agreement. For the first time in years, their hearts beat as one. Not with fear. Not with despair. But with courage. In that moment, a seed broke open in the soil of Obikara. A seed watered by memory. A seed warmed by courage. A seed that would grow into a tree. The tree of wisdom reborn. The whispers reached the palace. Kamau speaks the words of the ancestors. Kamau gathers the people under the Baobab. Kamau carries the wisdom the king sold. And Maliku's heart grew heavy with fear. One night, he summoned King Damba. The king, once proud, now thin and broken, entered the chamber like a shadow. Maliku sneered. Look at you. A king in name, but not in spirit. Your people listen not to you, but to a boy. Damba lowered his eyes. He had no answer. Maliku slammed his fist on the table. Find him. Crush him. Or soon you will have no throne to sit upon. The king trembled. For though he wore the crown, he was no longer its master. He was but a servant to the merchant he had trusted. Meanwhile, under the stars, Kamau stood again before the people. The crowd was larger now. Farmers, mothers, children, even soldiers who had once guarded the palace, all came to hear him speak. He raised his voice. Obikara is not dead. Our wisdom is not gone. It lives in us. It breathes in us. And as long as we live, we will not bow to lies. The people cheered. Their voices thundered like drums. But in the distance, soldiers marched. Maliku's men, clad in iron, carrying spears. The crowd fell silent. Fear rippled like water through their ranks. Kamau did not move. He stepped forward, placing himself between the soldiers and the people. I have no sword, he said. I have no shield. But I have wisdom. And wisdom is stronger than steel. The captain of the soldiers hesitated. For he too had once sat as a boy, hearing the proverbs under the Baobab. And as Kamau spoke, his heart stirred with memory. He lowered his spear. One by one, the soldiers followed. News reached Maliku that his soldiers had bowed to wisdom. His face twisted with rage. This boy, he hissed. This boy will undo everything. But deep in the palace, King Damba wept. At last, he saw the truth. The gold he had loved was gone. The throne he had sold was crumbling. And the people he had betrayed were rising without him. That night, he crept into the chamber where his crown lay. He lifted it slowly, feeling its weight like never before. And he whispered, "O ancestors, forgive me. I traded your wisdom for dust. I sold my people's soul for gold. And now I am nothing." Tears streaked his face. But the crown gave no answer. At dawn, the palace gates opened. The people gathered, expecting to see soldiers. Instead, they saw their king. barefoot, crown in hand, head bowed. He walked into the crowd. And for the first time, he did not command. He confessed. My people, he cried. I was a fool. I mocked wisdom. I sold our treasure. And in doing so, I sold you. I see now. Gold cannot feed the soul. Gold cannot guide the lost. Gold cannot replace the voice of the ancestors. Forgive me. If you cannot call me king, then let me be your servant. The people gasped. Some wept. For never had they seen a king lay down his pride. And Kamau stepped forward. He looked upon the broken man. And his voice rang clear. You cannot buy back what you sold. But wisdom is mercy. And mercy can heal. Rise, Damba. Not as the king who mocks wisdom, but as the man who learns from it. The people shouted with one voice. Wisdom! 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 And in that cry, the kingdom shook. Not with war, not with fear, but with unity. The drums were gone. The scrolls were lost. But the wisdom lived again. In the heart of the people. In the courage of a boy. And even, at last, in the repentance of a king. The sun rose over Obikara. But it did not rise on a kingdom of shame. It rose on a people reborn. The elders gathered once more. The children stood listening again. The markets hummed with voices. Not of fear, but of hope. And at the heart of it all, stood Kamau. Not a king, not a prince, but a boy who remembered. Maliku, the merchant, saw the change. He saw the soldiers who had once obeyed him now stand with their people. He saw the crowds that once bent under his orders now rise with courage in their eyes. And he knew his power was finished. For a kingdom armed with swords may fall, but a kingdom armed with wisdom cannot be broken. He fled that day, back across the desert, back to the lands where his greed was born. And his name, once spoken with fear, was spoken no more. King Damba, once blinded by pride, now walked humbly among his people. No longer boasting, no longer mocking, but listening, learning, serving. He sought Kamau's counsel, and the counsel of every elder, every mother, every farmer, every child. And slowly, the people forgave him. The Baobab tree, silent for so long, seemed to stir again. Its branches swayed in the wind. Its leaves whispered in the air. Some say the ancestors were speaking once more. Some say it was only the wind. But in the hearts of the people, hope returned. And that was enough. The years passed, and Obikara healed. The fields grew green again. The rivers sang once more. The laughter returned to the markets. But never again did the people take wisdom for granted. For they had learned. A fool who rejects wisdom loses everything. But a people who guard wisdom gain life itself. And so they taught their children. Wisdom is greater than gold. For gold may build a house, but wisdom makes it a home. Gold may buy a crown, but wisdom earns respect. Gold may fill the hand, but wisdom fills the heart. Kamau grew to be a leader, not by force, not by throne, but by the trust of his people. And when his time came, he sat under the Baobab, children at his feet, and said with a smile, "Remember, my sons, my daughters, wisdom cannot be sold. Wisdom cannot be stolen. It is the root that feeds the tree. Guard it well, for without it, we fall." And so the story ends. The story of a king who traded away his people's soul. And of a boy who carried it back. Remember it. For this is not only a tale of Obikara. It is the tale of every nation. Every leader. Every man and woman who forgets that wisdom is life. A fool who rejects wisdom loses everything. But the one who embraces it gains eternity.